मूर्त्याम् नारायणो नर इति स्वतपः प्रभावा दृष्ट्वात्मनो भगवतो नियमावलोपम् देव्यस्त्वनङ्गपृतना गतितुं न शेकुः।
धर्मस्य दक्ष दुहितारी अजानिष्टमूर्त्यम् नारायण नरो इति स तपः प्रवाह दृष्टात्मनो भगवतो नियमफलोपम् देवास्तु अनंगो पृतना गहितुम न शेकुः। हरे कृष्ण।
धर्मस्य दक्ष दुतिरज्ञास्त धर्मस्य दक्ष दुहितर्यजनासित मूर्त्यं नारायणो नर इति स्वतोप प्रभवा दृष्ट्वात्मनो भगवतो नियमावलोपम् देव्या त्वनङ्गप्रतन गतिं न स्वीकुः। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण। धर्मस्य दक्ष दुहित्री अजनिष्टमूर्त्यम् नारायणो नरो इति स्वतपः प्रभवः दृष्टो आत्मनो भगवतो नियमावपालम् दिव्यस्त अनङ्गप्रीताना गतितुं न शिखोः।
Anyone else? Okay. Dharmasya, of dharma, the controller of religious principles. Daksha, one of the Prajapatis. Duhitari, unto the daughter. Ajanishta, took birth. Mortyam, of the name Morti. Narayanaha, Narayan. Naraha, Nara. Iti, thus. Svatapaha, personal penances. Prabhavaha, strength. Drishva, by seeing. Atmanaha, of his own. Bhagavataha, of the personality of Godhead. Niyama avalopam, breaking the vow. Devyaha, celestial beauties. Two, but. Ananga pritanaha, companion of Cupid. Gatitum, to happen. Na, never. Shekhuhu, made possible. Translation and purport by Charanardhan Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation: to exhibit his personal way of austerity and penance, he appeared in twin forms as Narayan and Nara in the womb of Murti, the wife of Dharma and the daughter of Daksha. Celestial beauties, the companions of Cupid, went to try to break his vows, but they were unsuccessful, for they saw that many beauties like them were emanating from him, the personality of Godhead. So again, this chapter is the scheduled incarnations with specific functions. So it'll list which incarnations Krishna is coming as and what the purpose is. What's the specific function of these incarnations? So to exhibit his personal way of austerity and penance, that's the reason. And Narayan Rishi. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord, being the source of everything that be, is the origin of all austerities and penances also. Great vows of austerity are undertaken by sages to achieve success in self-realization. Human life is meant for such tapasya, with the great vow of celibacy or brahmacharya. In the rigid life of tapasya, there is no place for the association of women. And because human life is meant for tapasya, for self-realization, factual human civilization, as conceived by the system of Sanatana Dharma, or the school of 4 castes and 4 orders of life, prescribes rigid dissociation from women in 3 stages of life. In the order of gradual cultural development, one's life may be divided into 4 divisions: celibacy, household life, retirement, and renunciation. During the first stage of life, up to 25 years of age, a man may be trained as brahmachari under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, just to understand that woman is the real binding force in material existence. If one wants to get freedom from the material bondage of conditional life, he must get free from the attraction for the form of woman. Woman, or the fair sex, is the enchanting principle for the living entities, and the male form, especially in the human being, is meant for self-realization. The whole world is moving under the spell of womanly attraction. And as soon as a man becomes united with a woman, he at once becomes a victim of material bondage under a tight knot. The desires for lording it over the material world under the intoxication of a false sense of lordship specifically begin just after the man's unification with a woman. The desires for acquiring a house, possessing land, having children, and becoming prominent in society, the affection for community and the place of birth, and hankering for wealth, which are all like phantasmagoria or illusory dreams, encumber a human being, and he is thus impeded in his progress towards self-realization, the real aim of life. The brahmachari, or a boy from the age of 5 years, especially from the higher castes, namely from the scholarly parents, the brahmanas, the administrative parents, the kshatriyas, or the mercantile or productive parents, the vaishyas, is trained until 25 years of age under the care of a bona fide guru or teacher, and under strict observance of discipline, he comes to understand the values of life, along with taking specific training for a livelihood. The brahmachari is then allowed to go home and enter householder life and get married to a suitable woman. But there are many brahmacharis who do not go home to become householders, but continue the life of naishtika brahmacharis without any connection with women. They accept the order of sannyas, or the renounced order of life, knowing well that the combination with women is an unnecessary burden that checks self-realization. Since sex desire is very strong, at a certain stage of life, the guru may allow the brahmachari to marry. This license is given to a brahmachari who is unable to continue the way of naishtika brahmacharya. And such discriminations are possible for the bona fide guru. A program of so-called family planning is needed. The householder who associates with women under scriptural restrictions, after a thorough training of brahmacharya, cannot be a householder like cats and dogs. Such a householder, after 50 years of age, would retire from the association as a vanaprastha, be trained to live alone without the association.
जय श्री कृष्ण शाला
When the
नहीं
practice is complete, the same retired householder becomes a sannyasi, strictly separate from woman, even from his married wife. Studying the whole scheme of disassociation from women, it appears that a woman is a stumbling block for self-realization, and the Lord appeared as Narayan to teach the principle of womanly disassociation with a vow in life. The demigods, being envious of the austere life of the rigid brahmacharis, would try to cause them to break their vows by dispatching soldiers of Cupid. But in the case of the Lord, it became an unsuccessful attempt. When the celestial beauties saw that the Lord can produce innumerable such beauties by his mystic internal potency, and that there was consequently no need to be attracted by others externally. There is a common proverb that a confectioner is never attracted by sweetmeats. The confectioner who is always manufacturing sweetmeats has very little desire to eat them. Similarly, the Lord, by his pleasure potency, can produce innumerable spiritual beauties and not be the least attracted by the false beauties of material creation. One who does not know alleges foolishly that Lord Krishna enjoyed women in his Rasa Leela in Vrindavan, or with his 16,000 married wives at Dvaraka. The verse again, to exhibit his personal way of austerity and penance, he appeared in twin forms as Narayana and Nara in the womb of Murti, the wife of Dharma and the daughter of Daksha. Celestial beauties, the companions of Cupid, went to try to break his vows, but they were unsuccessful, for they saw that many beauties like them were emanating from him, the personality of Godhead. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravan Pachani Nirvishesha Shunjivari Prashati Deshadhane Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for joining. So today's purport may seem fairly heavy. One thing that my Guru Maharaj always points out when he's speaking of this sort of phenomenon is that Prabhupada would point out that for men, women means women, but for women, men, for women, it means men. It means whatever we're attracted to. These days, we'll just say, instead of using the terms men and women, we'll just use the terms if one thinks oneself a controller or enjoyer, then the obstacle is that which they wish to enjoy separately from Krishna, right? So we can use the terms enjoyer and enjoyed. So if one considers oneself independent from Krishna and an independent controller and enjoyer, then the obstacle is whatever they're wanting to enjoy, whether it's a man, a woman, money, some sort of object, whatever. So whatever we're trying to enjoy separately from Krishna, that is our greatest obstacle. And Nara and Narayan rishis, their purpose, the specific function of that incarnation, is to show human society that one must become detached from one's desired object of enjoyment, right? Anything that one wants to enjoy separate from the Supreme Lord. And so the second part of this verse talked about how the heavenly beings sent down Cupid and his associates to try to bewilder Nara and Narayan Rishi. So the story goes like this. Indra, the king of heaven, a Devata, great, powerful Devata, from time to time, he gets a little bit nervous. We read about this in different stories. When he sees someone else performing sacrifices and becoming powerful, sometimes he gets a little bit nervous because he thinks, okay, maybe this being is going to try to take over my position. We saw this with the horse sacrifices, etc. So in this case, also Indra. He saw Nara and Rishi, and they're completely self-controlled, and he's thinking, oh boy, if they end up, continuing in this way, they will certainly have enough power to just take my position. And so he sent down the Devatas and the heavenly beauties, the Gandharvas, the Apsaras, basically his thinking was, all right, well, they're sense controlled, but all they have access to is this earthly beauty, right? The women in the earthly realm, sure, they're beautiful, but they're nowhere near as beautiful as the heavenly denizens, right? The Gandharvas, the Apsaras, like that. And so he said, so we'll send some of those down, some of these beautiful ladies, and let's see how much in control of their senses they really are, right? So that was the idea. And so that's what they did. Cupid himself and all of his associates, very beautiful, heavenly denizens, beyond the beauty of anything we find here in this earthly realm, showed up to Narayana Rishi. And Narayana Rishi, of course, is unaffected by this because he's Krishna himself. All beauty comes from him. And in a similar way to how Indra thought, okay, well, sure, he can tolerate this, earthly beauty, but what about this heavenly beauty? In a similar way, the Lord Narayana Rishi expanded from himself. He showed through his coming from his own self. There were all these beauties that even surpassed all of these heavenly denizens, right? These beautiful women that were there. And so then they're thinking, oh my. Now, it's worth pointing out here that when the Devatas saw this, they understood immediately, okay, we're dealing with the Supreme Lord here. And they also understood that the transcendental, the eternal spiritual forms that were coming forth, which surpassed the beauty of even the heavenly denizens, that they were not to be enjoyed. They understood that they were actually engaging in the Lord's service, which is what made them even more attractive, right? They understood that the heavenly denizens, they had all this piety, which made them beautiful. But the beauties that were emanating from Narayana and Rishi, their beauty was far beyond that, something that they couldn't fathom exactly, but they knew that it was because of this service that they were performing to Sri Hari, and therefore they were even beyond what the topmost beauty you can find in this material world, right? And so instead of seeing these forms in a lusty sense and trying to enjoy them, they actually understood, no, this is a form that we respect. The bhakti that they have, the devotion that they have, the beauty that they are able to show that's beyond anything in this material world. That's something that's worthy of respect. So they placed Urvashi into the front of the procession, and then they went back to the heavenly planets. So we find that Narayana and Rishi, they're there in Badarik Ashram, they're performing their penances, performing austerities, and many different personalities go also to Badarik Ashram to also try to control their senses, right? One thing worth pointing out, I meant to do this right from the beginning. Oftentimes, when we're reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, it's good to chant a specific prayer, because actually before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, we are meant to offer obeisances unto some personalities, some specific personalities. Who wants to maybe either quote the verse or tell me those personalities who we should be offering obeisances to before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest? I'm sure.
Narayana Rishi.
Yes. Narayana Rishi, that's part of it. Yes. Does anyone want to give the whole thing? It's okay. So it's Narayanam Namaskritya, Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam.
Saraswati.
Yeah. So before reciting this, this is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, second chapter, verse 4. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, which, okay, that's obvious. He's the primary subject matter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, of course, we should offer our respectful obeisances. Unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being. We'll get back to that in a moment. Unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, who obviously she's the goddess of learning. So if we're trying to learn from Srimad Bhagavatam, it's in our benefit to offer obeisances to the goddess of learning and facilitate us to assimilate the knowledge that's there. And unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Again, obviously we want to offer our respects and appreciation unto Srila Vyasadeva, who put forth the effort to actually give us this means of conquest, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now let's go back to Narayan Rishi. It says the supermost human being, right? So we're understanding that the reasons we are to worship these people is also given in this verse. Srila Vyasadeva is the author. That's why we offer the respect. Saraswati, she's the goddess of learning. So also we offer respect so that we can assimilate that knowledge. Unto Narayan, he's the subject matter. And Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being. So supermost human being, what does that mean? It means we here in this earthly realm, we have human bodies. But in order to come to the human platform, in other words, in order to, as Srila Prabhupada said in the purport, not be like the cats and the dogs, then we have to follow a certain standard, right? We don't just go around doing whatever we want, enjoying whatever we feel like. No, the human platform means that we are to understand who actually are we? What is the spirit soul? Who is God? Where did this all come from? What is the relationship between us and God, whoever, from whom everything came? And so this is Sambandha Gyan. We want to understand the relationship between ourselves, the material nature, even where material nature came from, our relationship with the source of everything, etc. And so in order to understand that, we have to come to this ideal human platform. So we have to follow this supermost human being, Narayan Rishi, who show by their example that one has to be completely detached from the allurement of the material world, whether that comes in the form of literally a woman, or if it comes in the form of a man, or if it comes in the form of some sort of property, some sort of thing that we want to own, whatever we want to exploit or enjoy separately from the Supreme Lord, that's what our obstacle is. And in offering respects to Narayan Rishi and trying to follow the examples that he sets forth, we are able to gradually purify our consciousness so that instead of our default setting being to control and enjoy the things in our surroundings, our new setting, which is it goes from that's our conditioned setting. Default is actually a bad word, not the right word to use there. Our conditioned setting, but our constitutional setting, which is actually the default, our eternal nature, we are to understand how the things in our surroundings are to be properly utilized in the service of Krishna. And in order to do that, we need to control our senses, because as long as the senses are out of control, they're going to want to independently enjoy and control the different things that we're coming in contact with. So this is very important for us to understand that along with all of, we value the premise or the concept of spiritual growth. That's why we're here. But we also, at the same time, since we're here in the material world and we're conditioned souls, we also value material enjoyment, unfortunately. And so the process of Krishna consciousness is understanding what position we are in and gradually purifying our consciousness so that as time goes on, less and less we will be attracted to trying to enjoy things separately from Krishna, and more we will be attracted to understanding how things are properly used in Krishna's service. So the purport of the verse 1 to 4, the one where we're offering obeisances unto these different personalities before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. In his purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, all the Vedic literatures and the Puranas are meant for conquering the darkest region of material existence. Right? So that's what the Puranas are there for, to conquer the darkest regions of material existence. Continuing, the living being is in the state of forgetfulness of his relation with God due to his being overly attached to material sense gratification from time immemorial. That sentence is amazing. It shows us a lot. So first of all, Srila Prabhupada is showing us that proper sambandha, the relationship between the living entity and the Supreme Lord, has been severed. It's been forgotten. He's also giving the cause of that, right? Due to being overly attached to material sense gratification, right? We used our free will, and instead of making the decision to serve Krishna, we made a decision to enjoy separately from Krishna. So it's showing the cause of our suffering. It's showing, so the forgetful state, what caused that forgetful state? And it says from time immemorial. We can't trace out. In other words, we don't have access in our memory to anything but trying to be the controller and the enjoyer, right? So it's a very difficult thing. Then Srila Prabhupada continues. His struggle for existence in the material world is perpetual, and it is not possible for him to get it out of it by making plans, right? That's an important thing. We have to understand that this struggle for existence in this material world, it's perpetual, it's ongoing, it keeps going, and it's not possible for him to get out of it by making plans. So if we're trying to rely on our senses, our own effort, our own prowess, anything like that, it will be impossible, right? Because it's impossible to get out by making plans. Then Srila Prabhupada continues, because this seems hopeless at this point, right? We were just told that it's impossible to get out of here, right? Srila Prabhupada continues. If he at all wants to conquer this perpetual struggle for existence, okay, now we're relieved. There is a solution. We just have to read what it is. If he at all wants to conquer this perpetual struggle for existence, he must reestablish his eternal relation with God, right? So reestablish that sambandha, to understand what is our proper relationship with the Supreme Lord, right? So this first paragraph of this purport is just so amazing. It has so much in it. And it's just the verse is just saying that before we recite the Srimad Bhagavatam, we should offer respect to these few. But now this purport is showing why this is very important, why control of the senses is important. Because if we just continue to allow our senses to do their things, there's no way we're getting out of this perpetual struggling, right? But if we reestablish that eternal relation with God, and we're able to control those senses, to reel that in, to stop, to bring those senses in and stop trying to see things independently, separately from Krishna, trying to enjoy and control these things separately, then we can end this suffering. So in the fourth canto, we get a description of the birth of Nara and Narayan Rishi. It's mentioned in this verse that they are the twin sons of Daksha's daughter Murti and Dharma. So Dharma is the father, and Daksha's daughter Murti is the mother. And so I was gonna read this whole thing, but I'm gonna kind of skim through it because it's a lot. toward the end, so this would be the fourth canto, second chapter. The verses 53 through 59 tell the whole story. But toward the end, Maitreya is telling Vidura that the demigods worshipped with prayers the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's worth mentioning that in this verse, there are many words in Sanskrit with ending au, which means dual. So in English, we have singular and plural. If you're talking about one thing, a chair, then it's singular. And if you're talking about chairs, it could be any number of chairs, more than one, 2, 3, 4, 8, a million. In Sanskrit, it's much more specific. There's actually a dual case. So if you're talking about two things, you'll have this au ending. So we have Architao, Bhagavan Tao, Tao Imao, Ang Shao, the expansions, the two expansions. So Agatao, how the two appeared. So Nara and Narayan Rishi, sometimes it's said that they're known as two, and this is Krishna and Arjuna as these sages, Krishna and Krishna's energy, showing how to properly engage in austerity. Sometimes we just hear it as, we just hear Nara, Narayan, Rishi, and it sounds like it's one being. But in this verse, at least, it's very clear that it's talking about two. And also from earlier, it's very clear too. But sometimes it can be confusing. In the purport to 4.2.59, Srila Prabhupada writes, Narayan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Nara is a part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan. Thus, the energy and the energetic together are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? Just like when we talk about Krishna, Krishna's never alone. He always has someone there, right? And so when we worship Radha Krishna, right? And so when we talk about Srimati Radharani, it's always a capital H for her, capital S for she, because she is part of Krishna. Krishna is, you would say, not complete without his energy. He's the energetic, and she's the energy, right? So in a similar way, this is saying, the energy and the energetic together are the Supreme Personality of God. You can't really separate them. Maitreya, continuing the purport, Maitreya informed Vidura that Nara, the portion of Narayan, had appeared in the family of the Kurus, and that Narayana, the plenary expansion of Krishna, had come as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with the purpose of delivering suffering humanity from the pangs of material burdens. In other words, Narayan Rishi was now present in the world in the forms of Krishna and Arjuna. So this is showing how this Narayan Rishi, who we are offering our respects to, who is showing the world how to properly control their senses in order to attain the supreme eternal service to Krishna, they're forms of Krishna and Arjuna. Another verse is from the 5th canto, 19th chapter, verse 9, where Shukadeva Goswami is saying this quote, "The glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are inconceivable. He has appeared in the form of Nara Narayan in the land of Bharatvarsha at the place known as Badarikashrama, to favor his devotees by teaching them religion, knowledge, renunciation, spiritual power, sense control, and freedom from false ego. He is advanced in the opulence of spiritual assets, and he engages in executing austerity till the end of the millennium. This is the process of self-realization." So this verse is, again, showing who, where, and when this expansion is happening, and then for what purpose, right? To show people the process of self-realization, that one has to understand religion, knowledge, renunciation, spiritual power, sense control, and freedom from false ego. All of these are interconnected. In his purport to that verse, Srila Prabhupada writes that people in India may visit the temple of Narayan at Badarikashram just to learn how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his incarnation as Narayan, engages in austerities to teach the people of the world how to achieve self-realization. It is impossible to realize oneself simply by absorbing oneself in speculation and material activities. one must be very serious about self-realization and the practice of austerity. Unfortunately, the people of this age of Kali do not even know the meaning of austerity, right? We think austerity just means that it's an inconvenience, right? We don't understand that austerity means that we have to actually step out of our comfort zone in order to put the actual center of things, Krishna, in the center. And when we do so successfully, when we actually detach ourselves from the actions that we are performing, because it's now in the mood of service to Krishna, that actually the real bliss is experienced at that point. We think austerity means depriving ourselves of something, but real austerity actually means using everything properly, and being able to actually experience reality, right? Because here we're experiencing illusion, right? And the Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to help us distinguish that reality from illusion, right? To benefit everyone. And so that's where austerity comes in. I'm going to skip further down this purport because there's so much that we can. I'll just give this little tidbit. About 15 years ago, when I was studying through the Bhagavatam to make study guides and handbooks for two different schools in Mayapur, I had this inkling, this notion that the reason that we have to offer our obeisances to Narayan Rishi before studying Bhagavatam was because that we have to learn how to control our senses. And if we want to learn how to control our senses, obviously we want to approach someone who has already controlled their senses, right? And Srila Prabhupada makes it clear that that is an important thing for us to do in order to actually understand Krishna, right? So I had this notion and I wanted to compile basically all of the information we had about Narayan Rishi. And sort of that was my thesis, that this is the reason, right? And so I wanted to sort of like develop that, but I never had time to do it. So I still had that notion, but I never had anything concrete that said this is specifically and exclusively the reason that we want to, offer our Narayan Rishi at this, before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, as it turns out, there can be other reasons. One being that Narayan Rishi are the deities of all of Bharatvarsha. So when we read the description in the 5th canto, each of the different Varshas in Jambudweep have a devotee and a deity, and we understand we are also given the different prayers that are chanted. So we can say, okay, it could also be because of that. It could also be because Narayan Rishi gave this anthology of the Puranas. He presented that to Narada Muni, who then presented it to Vyasadeva. So that could also be the reason. But they're all interconnected. The reason that the people of Bharatvarsha worship Narayan Rishi is because he is the supermost human being. And Bharatvarsha is where the human beings are, right? In other realms, there are devatas, right? And the devatas, they're pretty much just living out their previously accumulated piety. They're not making any new piety. They're just living out what they've saved up from long ago, right? Same thing with the lower planetary systems. They're just living out they're living off of their savings. You put it that way, right? But the people in Bharatvarsha, they're able to accumulate, right? They're able to build things up. They're able to make changes. And so that's a very unique thing, right? And so to be a human, it means that we should have an example of the best human to follow, right? And that is why in Bharatvarsha, Narada Muni worships Narayan Rishi, right? So that we can follow that example. So we can see that example and follow it and hopefully, develop some of these qualities through purification. Yeah, in that fifth canto, 19th chapter, the verses 10 through 14, there's so many more really great points about it. Yeah, I'll just read some of those. So Narada, as I mentioned, he's there in Bharatvarsha and he worships Narayan Rishi, and this is the mantra that he chants. Okay, this is Narada speaking. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master of creation, maintenance, and annihilation of this visible cosmic manifestation. Yet he is completely free from false prestige. Although to the foolish he appears to have accepted a material body like us, he is unaffected by bodily tribulations like hunger, thirst, and fatigue. Although he is the witness who sees everything, his senses are unpolluted by the objects he sees. This is a very important sentence because we only see through these eyes, right? And we get distracted by basically everything we see. He sees through everyone's eyes. So everything that there is to offer in this material world that would be distracting to us, he's not affected by any of it because everything is coming from him. So what is there for him to be distracted by, right? The prayer continues. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that unattached, pure witness of the world, the Supreme Soul, the personality of Godhead. O my Lord, master of all mystic yoga, this is the explanation of the yogic process spoken by Lord Brahma, who is self-realized. At the time of death, all yogis give up the material body with full detachment simply by placing their minds at your lotus feet. That is the perfection of yoga. Materialists are generally very attached to their present bodily comforts and to the bodily comforts they expect in the future. Therefore, they are always absorbed in thoughts of their wives, children, and wealth, and are afraid of giving up their bodies, which are full of urine and stool. If a person engaged in Krishna consciousness, however, is also afraid of giving up his body, what is the use of having labored to study the Shastras? It was simply a waste of time. This is a very heavy statement. And sometimes when we read a statement like this, we think, well, I don't see myself as ever, I don't, I don't see it as an attainable goal to actually have my senses under control. Therefore, maybe I shouldn't bother studying Shastra because if I do and I don't come to that point, then it just says here, it's simply a waste of time, right? One might come to that conclusion and use that as an excuse. All right, why bother? I'm not going to bother studying Shastra, right? But it's through the strength of Shastra, through the strength of Narayan Rishi, through the strength of our Guru, through the strength of the sadhus that are also aspiring to attain this. It is through that we will be able to, without, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that we will be able to attain this. But we have to do it properly. So in his purport, Srila Prabhupada reiterates this and emphasizes this. If despite practicing bhakti yoga and studying all the Vedic literature, one is afraid of giving up his bad body, which is the cause of all his suffering, what is the use of his attempts to advance in spiritual life? The secret of success in practicing yoga is to become free from bodily attachments, right? So at whatever stage we are in our I lose words sometimes. In our cultivation of bhakti, whatever stage we're in, that's okay. We may be very attached to many different things, right? That's okay. But if we follow the process, we will be able to engage all of these different attachments in Krishna service successfully. And we will lose attachment to these things because we will actually see that trying to enjoy them separately will never, ever give any sort of enjoyment. Whereas using them in its proper situation, that's not the word. Using them in the proper way, we'll just say, that will actually give true bliss, right? Not this temporary, happiness that we sometimes think we enjoy. Then in 5 5th canto, 19th chapter, text 15 continues. Therefore, O Lord, O Transcendence, kindly help us by giving us the power to execute bhakti yoga so that we can control our restless minds and fix them on you. So this is the prayer that is being presented or offered to Narayan Rishi, right? We're asking them to kindly give us the power to execute bhakti yoga so that we can control our restless minds and fix them upon Krishna, right? So it is absolutely necessary for us to control our senses. It is impossible for us to control our senses by our own power. We have to do it with help. The best help, of course, is through Narayan Rishi, and our connection to Narayan Rishi is through our spiritual master, right? And we have to approach them, again, humble, submissive, mood of service. They have exactly what we're trying to get, so we have to approach them with the proper mood and with the proper reciprocation, appreciation. And when we do that, then we're able to successfully control the senses. Very quickly, there are a few personalities mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam that went to Badarik Ashram to meditate on Narayan Rishi. One of them was in the 9th canto, the beginning of that, the story of King Sudyumna. There's this special forest that King Sudyumna entered. And this forest, the nature of this forest is that any being that enters turns into female, because that's where Shiva and his wife enjoy. And no other man should be able to see Lord Shiva's wife in that particular state. So the reason that is the nature of this forest is because prior to King Sudyumna coming upon this forest, a group of sages came upon that forest. And as soon as they saw what was going on, they immediately turned around and they went to Badarik Ashram, right? Because they understood this isn't the purpose of life. The purpose of life isn't for me to try to enjoy things. The purpose is to control the senses. So they went right to Badarik Ashram and then they did that. So that's why Shiva then made it so no men could actually enter the forest. If they crossed the threshold, they would turn into female. So that's one, this group of sages who, instead of giving into this temptation, they understood, okay, no, we should go and put ourselves in good association so that we can overcome any sort of material desire. Also, Muchakunda, so he performed severe austerities for a very long time. Krishna basically woke him up. He saw that Kali Yuga was in full swing. He knew that there was nothing here for him. So he just said, okay, I'm going to go to Badarik Ashram and that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to, meditate there. I don't want to deal with Kali Yuga, right? In Bahulashva's prayers, he says, obeisances to the sage Narayan, who always undergoes austerities in perfect peace, right? This is an important thing. Austerities in perfect peace. So we know the peace formula from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 529. It's basically to understand that Krishna is everything, right? And that we're not independent. So when we undergo austerities, we're understanding how Krishna is everything, what our true relationship is between the Jiva and the Supreme Lord. And in that state, that's where we can get the peace. So as mentioned earlier, the people in the material world these days, we don't even know what austerity means. We think it sounds terrible, right? But it actually means perfect peace because we're actually connected to reality, not illusion. Okay, there are several other stories. I can't go through all of them because we're basically out of time. But all of the stories of Narayan Rishi involves sense control, and showing the example of how to become a proper human being. So there's something to that, right? So I'll just give a quick, I'll give a conclusion. I won't call it a quick conclusion because we covered a lot today. The conclusion is that in order to properly redirect our consciousness from self-centric to Krishna-centric, we must perform voluntary austerities under the guidance of an authorized spiritual master in order to purify our polluted consciousness, right? This is a necessity. As we chant, which is the Cheto-Darpana process, right, the clearing process, it cleanses the mirror of the soul. As we chant, we should be noticing that our material attachments are decreasing. If they are not decreasing, we should find out from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra what we're doing wrong, right? We have to figure out what offenses to the holy name am I committing that is resulting in me maintaining all of these material attachments, right? We're not becoming less and less attached to material, then our chanting must be offensive. That's how that works. So from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, we have to figure out, okay, what's actually holding me back? Because this is a goal. Then, with the help of said authorized Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, we can navigate our way through the various obstacles that are binding us to this perpetual world of material suffering. And of course, just like with anything else, if we truly want to perfect something, we have to approach someone who has already perfected it, right? And ask them nicely to teach it to us. We should reciprocate with their willingness and their kindness in teaching us by offering them service, whatever we can do. And so along with our individual spiritual masters, we should also worship Nara Narayan Rishi and pray to become proper recipients of his mercy so that we too can become sense-controlled and successfully prepare ourselves to enter Krishna's pastimes. We have to understand that human life, as Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the purport, is meant for tapasya, and as such, celibacy is required, right? If we're not on that platform now, that's okay, right? We're in the material world. There should be no surprise that these rebellious jivas here are acting as if independent from the Supreme Lord. We should be like, oh, no, that's like it shouldn't be a surprise. That's okay. Don't get down on yourself. This is what we're here for. But we should understand, if we want to return to our true nature of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, we have to follow this system, right? The Sanatana Dharma system that was given in this purport. And celibacy has to at least be something that we're striving to reach. We may not be there yet. That's okay. But it has to be something that we understand that eventually we have to get to if we want to actually attain the ultimate goal of engaging in Krishna's pastimes, right? We have to take ourselves out of the center, and we have to recognize that Krishna is the only center. So, but although celibacy has to be something that we strive to reach for, we shouldn't do that independently from bhakti, because celibacy, just for the sake of being celibate, isn't actually enough, right? We're not just looking to control these material senses. We're looking to engage in Krishna's pastimes, right? So it needs to be there, but it has to be in conjunction with bhakti. It shouldn't just be that, okay, I want to control my senses so I can become more powerful, right? Because there is this phenomenon where if you do control the senses, you can become the master of these different mystic siddhis, right? You can become actually very powerful. But that's not why we're controlling the senses. We're controlling the senses because we want to actually engage in the master of the senses, right? Rishikesh. So our goal isn't to become powerful beings in this material world. Our goal is to return to our eternal nature and serve Krishna in the spiritual world, right? So if we can, as long as we're considering ourselves independent controllers and enjoyers, we will not be able to enter into Krishna's pastimes. So that's why it's very important that eventually we need to understand that sometime in the future, if I'm not celibate now, sometime in the future, that's actually a goal, and it's an important one, but it has to be in conjunction with bhakti. It's a mentality that we require for transcendence, this understanding. And if we do it right, we will never feel as if we're depriving ourselves from something that we want or need. Because if we engage our senses in the service of the master of the senses, we will find true bliss, right? Not just the temporary reflection of bliss. We'll actually experience the real thing. So it takes letting go of this desire to control and enjoy to actually enjoy, right? So if we want to conquer the bondage of the material world, for which this Srimad Bhagavatam is the very means, we must offer our respects to the Supreme Lord, who is the primary subject matter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the goddess of learning, so that we can assimilate the knowledge presented within, the author, so we can show gratitude for his provision of this most valuable presentation, and Nara Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, so that we too can learn how to behave like proper human beings. And that is what we can take away from today's verse. Are there any questions or comments or concerns? If so, please unmute yourself. Doesn't seem so. Yeah, sometimes we get hung up when reading purports like this. Sometimes we get hung up on the, the man, woman, the woman being the thing that is preventing us from our goal. And sometimes we get hung up on that, and because we see things on the material platform, right? And so since we see things on the material platform, we sometimes read purports like this, think they're somehow unfair or sexist or chauvinistic or things like that. But if we understand the principle of what's being said, and if we actually read it, we see what is meant by this. It's meant that because all jivas are female. We're not purusha, right? We're prakriti. But we're taking the position of the enjoyer. All the jivas, whether you're in a male body or a female body, we are taking the position of independent enjoyers. And the things that we're trying to enjoy, right? Those are the things that are holding us back. So for a man, sometimes it's a woman, sometimes it's a man. For a woman, sometimes it's a woman, sometimes it's a man. Sometimes it's, like I said, it's just it's another object. It's something different. It's not even another person. It's something that we're trying to exploit. So if we can understand it in this way, that the obstacle, it's not as though women in general are the stumbling block. It's the desire to enjoy women separate from Krishna that's the stumbling block, right? And so we don't have to use that term woman. We can just say whatever it is that we're trying to enjoy separately from Krishna independently, that is what the stumbling block is. And so we have to take that seriously. We have to understand how to properly associate with all of the different things in the world, whether it's with other human beings or how we're utilizing, different items, tools, instruments, whatever. Everything we have to understand how to properly utilize in Krishna service. So that's truly what the purport was saying. Like I said, it can be very easy to get hung up on some of the terms since we're really dealing with, material consciousness, and we can think that somehow that this isn't actually a fair presentation. But if we get down to the principle of it, then we see that it is. So are there any questions about that? It looks like Kaivalya Prabhu has unmuted. Do you have something to add, Prabhu? Or is that
Not really, Prabhu. I just want to thank you for explaining Narayan Rishi, because normally we say so many incarnations of the Lord and we discuss about them, but Narayan Rishi, we don't discuss in day-to-day life, like Narsinga Avatar and Vara Avatar. We all talk about those, but Narayan Rishi, very little talk about that. So I thank you for explaining that nicely.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you. I'm glad that you actually brought that point up, because we talk about Lord Narasingha because we appreciate the fact that Lord Narasingha will always protect his devotees. So that's something that we want. Narayan Rishi, they teach us how to control our senses, and most of us aren't ready for that yet. So that's why we don't really talk about that very often.
Yeah.
But it's a very important thing for us to talk about. I'm very glad that you brought that up, because that's a point that we need to face. We see that, yeah, we're attracted to when the Lord comes and does all these splendid pastimes. But when he's controlling his senses just to show us how to control our senses, we're like, we'll maybe deal with that some other time. That's not our priority. But it should be. And that's what these verses are all about. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else?
Very nice class, Prabhu. main thing is controlling the senses. That is the main part of the human being.
Yes.
And this Naranarayan thing is, we always pray, Narayanam Namaskrityam. But I was thinking all that now, when you said we do that, we do automatically we pray that. But thinking this much was very good, and you just point out a lot of things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very kind.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hey, anyone else? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so we'll stop here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Vishakapa Sindhubheva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo
Namo
Namo.
Namo.